Everyone, this is Benjamin from Samy's CinemaWorks. Or for those of you unfamiliar with our location here in Hollywood, we're a premium cinema rental house and equipment sales operation on the 4th floor of Samy's Camera. And today I am joined by two incredibly knowledgeable partners. I have Peter Marr and Grant Theophilus from EOS Cinema. And we're incredibly excited about the new product release from Canon. We just started getting our first deliveries of the C70 cinema camera. And so far, it's been incredibly exciting. This is such a capable and compact camera that we at Samys can't wait to see what our image creators take out into the field and bring back to show us. And we're going to take a sort of a deep dive into the camera with Peter today. Hey, Peter, how are you?
I'm good, man. Thank you so much for having me. And I want to say thanks to everybody for showing up. You know, it's a nice afternoon out there. Took the time out, really appreciate it. And yeah, I can't wait to dive into this with y'all.
Great. And I know as we move into, we're going to be using our chat today so that we can field any pertinent questions from the viewers. So stay active in there. If Peter's talking about something and we want to go in and kind of dig a little bit deeper, that's what we're here for today. So keep that chat active. I'll be moderating that and letting Grant and Peter know anything that's pertinent. And then also, we're going to talk about a couple of really great programs that we have. This is a great time of year to look at acquiring cinema equipment because Canon has some really attractive promotions to share with you guys later today. All right. Well, Peter, if you want to jump into the lesson plan, I think we've got a lot to cover.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I'm going to do, I'm not too much of a fan of PowerPoints, but I will show you some slides that will tell you the story a little bit better than I could just with the words alone. I've got the camera here too, so we're going to take a little walk around with the camera. We're going to pull the lens off. We can talk about different looks, things like that. And we're also, I'm going to stop every once in a while because I know there should be some questions that come up, and feel free to chime in on the chat. Benjamin and Grant, I think, are going to be looking at that. So, you know, if the train goes too far off the tracks, you know, before anybody gets a chance to jump on, so to speak, we'll catch everybody up to speed. So that being said, how much I love showing PowerPoints. Hello. Here we go. This is basically the C70. This is a camera that starts to check a lot of boxes. This is a camera that starts to meld that world between the cinema cameras and the DSLR cameras a little bit more than, you know, like even maybe the C200 would have. So now when you start breaking this camera down, this is basically a list of specs off of it. Feel free to, you know, take a screenshot if you want. This is just kind of a laundry list of what the camera offers right off the top. Some of the big things to notice is this is the first cinema camera with an RF mount. And you're going to start seeing this RF mount a little bit more and more. You see it on the R, the R5, the R6. The way the engineers can design lenses, they can design the rear elements to be a little bit bigger. It actually has a shallower flange depth to it. It still has, it actually has enhanced communication between the lens and the camera body itself. So stabilization is going to be a little more advanced with RF glass on it. The autofocus is going to be a little bit faster. We were able to take the autofocus tracking features out of the 1DX Mark III and put it into this camera. We also added something called Auto ISO. I think you've all heard of Auto ISO. This camera is starting to bridge that gap where it gives you over 16 stops of dynamic range with a DGO sensor that we're going to talk about a little more in depth later. But it also is small enough, it's lightweight, it uses the same batteries that our other cinema cameras have. So you can really start to mix and match this camera in with the C300 Mark III, with the C500 Mark II. This has remote capabilities on it. So you can, you know, it's a nice lightweight camera you can fly. It's a camera you can set up on a jib arm somewhere. The battery life is a lot longer on this camera than some of our other cameras. And you also have the built-in ND filters. You've got a lot of other features built into this camera that we're going to talk about in a bit. But again, there's a little bit of a laundry list on there, and everything is centered around this Super 35 sensor. One thing about this sensor is it's the same sensor that we have in the C300 Mark III. So that being said, you are getting what we call a DGO, dual gain output sensor, which gives you, I'm just going to turn myself off so you can see the whole thing. All right, which gives you over 16 stops of latitude off of that sensor in Canon Log 2. up to 60 frames a second. So what this means is it's not really, not to be confused with a dual gain sensor, because it's actually reading two different gains at the same time. Basically, it's giving you an HDR image right off the bat, and per frame, you're getting more color saturation in the highlights, and you're also getting more better noise in the shadows. So this really does reach up into different latitudes, and where you're really going to see it is in that shadow detail. Really cleans it up quite a bit. It's a beautiful image. The next thing I wanted to show you was it's a really compact size. Here we go. Really compact size. It's smaller, shorter than a 1DX, a little squattier than a 1DX, a little less thick than a C200. And again, it takes that same battery that the C200, the C300 Mark III, the C500 Mark II, 300 Mark II. So you're able to mix and swap these batteries all around. The RF mount, like I said, it's a little bit of a shorter flange depth, but we do have these three adapters right off the top. These are the same three adapters that you would use for the EOS R, the R5, and the R6. There's basically a standard one. It's just the EF to EF, or excuse me, EF to R adapter straight across. And then we have one with an assignable ring. So if you're not familiar with the R glass, we actually have an extra ring built right into the RF lenses. And this is an 85 prime. So you see the zoom, or excuse me, the focus ring right here, but you do have an assignable ring. So you do have the option to basically assign that lens a separate function. So if you put an RF 70 to 200 on this camera, you can basically set that lens up as a fizz lens. So you can put a focus, an iris, and a zoom control all on that lens. So you have those three rings. You can assign the extra ring to do a multitude of different functions, but depending on your shooting style, you just get that extra option. And then when we break these, excuse me, when we talk about the other lens adapter, we do have a filter adapter. So you can drop in an ND filter or a polarizing filter. The one pretty saucy thing about this camera is that it does have the built-in NDs. So don't necessarily need that ND drop-in filter. It's nice to have. However, we do have a new, we do have a new EF to R adapter specifically made for this camera. So it's a 0.71. It basically comes with two crescent-shaped mounts that will secure it to the camera body itself. Little Allen key or little Allen screws, screw it right in. It's essentially a speed booster. So you get roughly one stop more of light coming through this lens, and you will also get basically the full frame equivalent. So if you have, say, an 18mm lens on this camera, it will look like an 18mm lens. It's not going to Super 35 itself into a little bit more of a zoomed out lens, like a 24mm look. So that being said, you do get that same field of view that you would get on a full frame image sensor with this adapter onto it. I know that's a lot that I just said, that I threw out there right now. Before we get too far down the road, I'm going to stop this little PowerPoint. And one thing I wanted to show you is walk around the camera. But does anyone have any questions so far on what we talked about, whether it's the adapters, kind of an intro into the list of what the camera can do as far as, you know, the sensor and things like that? Anything coming out of the chat?
Hey, I have one question, which is was that last adapter, the first three that you showed, are those the ones that do the crop censoring and then the other one doesn't?
No, they're all gonna, is this Rick?
Yes, it is, Rich.
Hey man, how you doing? How you doing?
Good. Thanks for
It's been
your help.
so long since I've talked to you, dude.
I know. Thanks for the help the other day, by the way.
Yeah, of course, of course. Here, I'll run back into this real quick. I'm going to bounce back. These are basically the same adapters you would have for the R5. So
Okay.
it's, you know, it's a Super 35 sensor, so you don't really have to worry about, you know, whether the lens will cover it or not. You can put an EF lens on this adapter and it will still cover it. Okay. With this last adapter, this one is basically giving you a little more light. So it's, you know, kind of like a magnifying glass, so to speak. It's a speed booster. It gives you a little more light intensity per area surface, per surface area. So if you have an f4 lens, it will almost give you the light level of an f2.8. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Does that work on the R5 or no?
No, it's specifically made for this one. Yeah. I haven't tested it, but I'm sure with enough ingenuity, you could probably crank that on there if you really had to. I wouldn't recommend it though. But does anybody else have any other questions before we move on?
You guys too. I think we've got a pretty small group here, so I think it's okay to use the audio, but typically when we start to get multiple people on the Zoom, it kind of takes over the feed. So let's try and voice the questions if we can in the chat, and then we can bring them up to Peter. Maybe open it up, but it normally works a little bit better if we do it that way. Rich,
and especially on a call like this, it's a little more intimate. I know we can kind of pick and pull things apart as we move on, and that's it's kind of nice.
We do typically like to record these and upload them onto our YouTube. So if we use the chat, we won't put any of our viewers today on the main stage for the video.
Yep.
So one thing I did want to mention, the concept of these sort of speed boosters, that adapter that kind of changes the image projection, changes the brightness and the angle of view. It's something that you can beautifully understand if you actually just come into Samy's and take a look at it. Really, we can make sense of it really quick by putting it on a director's monitor here on the sales floor. And I want to let you know, we do have an open showroom here at our Hollywood location. We're taking all of the CDC guidelines here in the store so that we can keep our image creators safe, but you can come on in and we can actually show you our Canon Cinema products here on the 4th floor. We have a great set and we're doing the masking, social distancing, and you're gonna find a sales associate that wants to take every precaution to keep you safe, but let you get some hands-on experience with the equipment. We're really happy to have that opportunity here.
Cool. And it does look like we have one other question from the chat. Paul asked if there's an adapter to make the RF lenses full frame or just the EF lenses.
So the RF lenses are going to be full frame right off the top, because basically every RF mounted camera DSLR that we've made has been full frame up to this point. So essentially our APS-C mirrorless camera would be the M series. So it's actually a different mount altogether. And you can also get an EF adapter for that too. But yeah, the RF adapter to EF adapter, you can still, like I said, you can put the EFS glass on there. Does that answer that question? I would say so.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think so.
I wanted to talk about just sort of my personal reaction. Seeing the RF mount come to an EOS cinema product is just super exciting for people that love glass. Here at CinemaWorks, we have an incredible library of vintage legacy cinema lenses. Most of them are REPL mount, or mounts that require a shallower flange than the traditional Canon EF. It's always been a conversation with our filmmakers. Do they want to buy a camera like a C300 NPL mount or EF? But because of flange distance, sometimes if you want EF, you didn't have the option to put a different type of lens on later if you had a special lens in mind for a project. This mount is just wide open. It's such a shallow flange that you can adapt almost any lens that's ever been made to it. You're never really going to run into a serious limitation with flange depth with any type of vintage optic. That's just especially cool that you guys went with that. And you have to see this ND built into the camera. It's a marvel how they put some sort of variable neutral density between a sensor that's so forwardly mounted in the flange of the camera. It's really remarkable engineering from Canon.
Yeah, it's I'm glad you brought up that vintage glass, so I wouldn't have to on this call. The 20mm depth does allow for other adapters to work with this mount that wouldn't work with an EF mount before. It's not a variable ND. They are glass inserts, which makes it even a little bit more incredible how they did it. And since we're talking about that, I think this would be a nice transition to get into a little walk around the camera. So right now, this is basically it. Removable handle. I'm gonna pull this off just to give you, it comes off that easy. And when we talk about these ND filters, this is something that you kind of probably have to see to believe. I don't know if you can pick that up right there, but if I press this button, you can see those ND filters actually slide over. So right off the top, this camera is going to give you 2, 4, and 6 stops of ND, and you also have the option to get 8 and 10 stops of ND in the camera. You just have to go into the menu and select the extended ND range on it. And when you start walking around the camera, this is, you also have a couple of buttons right on the front. Anytime you see a button with a number on it, it's assignable. A little trick for basically any of our cinema cameras from the C300 Mark II and newer, all you have to do is hold down the menu button and press any button with a number on it, and you're going to get the menu to pop up, which reassigns that button's functionality. So if, for instance, if I take this button right here, AF lock, if I don't want to use it for AF lock, I can assign it to something else. When you walk around the side of the camera, you have a lot more buttons, and I'm actually going to zoom in a little bit to give you a little bit better, closer look at that. Probably see it a little bit easier now. So now you're looking at the side of the camera, and let me just cut that off. My producer is off today. It's just me in here in my office. So you saw the ND 1 and 2. You also have a few white balance buttons. On the side of the camera, you have button number 4, which technically turns on or off the waveform, but you also have the option to turn it into a start-stop. So now it's kind of a traditional place to have a start and stop on a cinema camera. You also have a few more buttons. These are all basically assist features. So you had quick access to peaking and zebra. You also have your headphone, a full HDMI-A output of the camera. And one thing to know, this is going to separate this camera from a lot of our other cinema cameras. This is the only video output off of this camera, is the HDMI. We don't have SDI out. However, on the other side of the camera, we do have an SDI port, which is for timecode in and out. And it's going to follow the same protocol that a lot of our other cinema cameras will have, where you can jam timecode to it. You can pull timecode out of it. And right above that, we have our SD card slot. One thing I will say, I'll show you a slide in a few minutes, but the V90 cards are the cards you need to get for this. I have a list of cards that have been tested and approved by Canon USA that are available in the States right now. We'll show that slide in a few minutes. And if you notice, there's another quarter 20 mount on the side, as opposed to the other quarter 20 and 3/8 mounts on the bottom. What this mount is for vertical shooting. So for anybody who has had to deal with any vertical advertising, or if you really want to make your Instagram sing, you can shoot this camera vertically. There's a portion of the menu you can select that will change your on-screen displays. So you can have the camera vertical, and you can read everything on the camera without straining yourself. And the camera would just be propped up with that quarter 20 without any other plate adapters for it. Right off the top here, you have basically the on-off switch. This is meant to be, you can just turn it on or off. You can lock off everything. You can lock off everything but the start-stop button. And you also have a familiar setup on here too. So this camera is basically, like I said, it's coming into the world of mixing between the DSLR and the cinema world. So it's operable by one hand. You have the dial up top. You have the start and stop function right there. You also have a few custom buttons on top, or excuse me, the media buttons on top. And then in the back, you also have a very similar setup with a control dial. You have an extra function wheel up top, which you can reassign to. And again, menu, any other button that you see with a number on it, you can reassign. You also have the joystick for navigation. The battery that comes with the camera is the BP-A30, and it will run on the A60. And one thing I will say is this battery lasts, you get a good solid few more hours out of it than you would on some of our other cameras. We'll just say that. Touchscreen interface, which is pretty cool because now we have a direct touch control set up on this camera, which I'll talk about in a minute. All of your audio inputs are on the back side of this panel. It's a variable, or excuse me, it's a, the word is blanking on me right now, but it's the movable LCD. I'll just say that, very angle. Thank you for picking that one up. Speaking of audio, coming across here, one thing different about this camera, mini XLR inputs. So just by the size and the weight and the real estate on the camera body itself, we ended up going with the Mini XLR, but a very simple adapter cable will transmit your XLR into your Mini XLR. Very simple. Samy's has them. Starting to be a little more common now, the smaller cameras out there. And another thing you'll notice too, even though this is an extremely small camera, you do have a heat sink. So you do have the air intake on this side of the camera. And when you go off to the other side, you do have the exhaust vent underneath, and you do have an exhaust up top where this handle comes into play here, where that strap goes into the handle. So that being said, did a nice quick physical walk around the camera. You know about the handle, you know about, kind of where the placement of everything is. Before we dive into the camera, we go into the menu a little bit. Is there anything anybody would like to ask before we go into that part of it? And this is a good chance for me to plug this cable in while we're talking about that.
No, and to kind of piggyback on the actual ergonomics of this camera, this is brand new for any type of Canon Cinema EOS product, and just holding the camera in your hand just feels good. Yeah, Samy's camera did an excellent video. I saw Courtney's on this event Zoom call right now. Big shout out to him. He did a great job. But I mean, even he mentioned, it just feels really, really good in your hand. So I think once we're able to kind of do these in-person demos, and once Samy's once you do get your hands on this camera, it's a lot different than just seeing it through a screen. So yeah, no, I think it's going to be a lot different once you guys physically are able to hold this in your hand. It's pretty remarkable.
One thing I love about our location here at Fairfax is we have the full gamut of motion capture equipment available. I mean, be it a super compact camcorder, a hybrid mirrorless camera from Canon, things like the R5 and RP, they're here on display, all the way up to cameras like the C500 and C300 Mark III that we love this year. And when you look at the hybrid cameras that are on the market today, one thing we're always kind of quick to tell people about when they're considering those as a serious cinema tool is you're going to have to add a lot to it to build it into a reliable kind of filmmaking tool. You need to add neutral density on the front of it. Batteries in most hybrid cameras that are primarily focused on photography for their design normally last half an hour, 45 minutes for motion capture. You typically don't see balanced microphone inputs. The list goes on. You tend to have to add a lot of accessorization and GAC to a camera. It gets larger and larger, and the cost goes up and up. By the time you sort of turn a hybrid camera into a cinema camera, its price is normally well above what they're bringing this camera to the market for. And they've done everything to make this a useful cinema tool, but maintain this form factor that we've seen since, like the EOS 5D, which is great because you can rig it on a camera, you can put it on a handheld gimbal, you don't need a full steady vest. A customer of mine was showing me footage he shot with this camera. He just picked it up from us Friday, but he took a lightweight handheld gimbal, went into a car window, followed a musician getting out of it, walking through a hallway, through doors, opening them with his arm as he went through. That's kind of a feat with a larger cinema tool. So it's opening up so much creative storytelling in this form factor, but they're getting all these essential tools into the camera body somehow through just excellent engineering.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you go, Grant.
No, there's another Canon video on our YouTube page as well that highlights that vertical mount, the mounting point on the side handle of this that's originally for vertical video, but you can get creative with that. There's a video on Canon's YouTube. It's mounted to the side of a car. Horizontal, the kind of the standard way that I'm used to knowing. But yeah, it's just, you can get really creative the way that you use this camera. We did get another question, Peter. I just didn't know if you wanted to piggyback on what we were saying.
XLR adapters?
Yeah, do the Mini XLR adapters in any way compromise the sound?
From what I gather, no, they don't. Now, granted, I can't speak for any Mini XLR to XLR adapter manufacturers out there, but from what I've been able to tell, it's no different than putting an extension cable onto your XLR microphone into your camera.
We would definitely lead anybody looking at this level of camera to a more premium audio cable. not everything out there online is created equally. We make sure that we carry more professional products here at Samys, so keep that in mind.
Very, very well stated, sir. Very well stated.
Three prongs balance connectors, so it's there. We've had many cameras with mini XLR on the market for quite some time now. No issues whatsoever.
Yep. Yeah, so showed you a couple of slides. We talked about the camera. We walked around the camera. Now let's take a little bit of a look inside the camera. So off the screen, I've got the lens cap on so nobody vomits while I'm moving around here. But right off the top, you can customize this display. If you really don't want all this stuff on there, you can turn it on or off. Right off the top, we have a waveform monitor that you can actually see now. You can actually get it through the HDMI out, which is something we haven't had before. You do have all of that autofocus capability, like I said before, face detection in there too. You do have your audio levels that go up onto the side, and you see all of your pertinent information. You have battery life, you have your, what cards are in, what format each card is on, because this camera can actually record multiple formats to different cards. One thing you'll notice down in the bottom corner is, let me get into this real quick here. Hold on there. All right, so one thing you notice into that bottom corner here, if you can see this, I'm gonna kind of throw you in to the screen. It is a touchscreen interface. So now all I have to do is touch anywhere on the screen. I can adjust where, the autofocus is if I want. You can turn on the face detection just like a lot of our other cameras have. But if you notice on the bottom corner, it looks like an icon with a screen and a little finger tapping onto it. And I'm gonna hit it a few times so you can see it full screen. It'll X out, or I can tap into it. And what this is this is a nice quick access to a lot of functions that you would normally have to go into the menu, or you would have to assign a button to get into. So right now, if I want to change my white balance, all I have to do is tap this with my thumb or finger, and I can change what that white balance is, and I can adjust that accordingly. If I want to come in and change my ND stops, you can probably hear it in my mic right now, but it changes that ND, and it changes it incredibly fast. If I want to adjust the iris without turning the dial, if I want to adjust it like I would on, I don't know, an XA or a Vixia camera, I can. Slider for the ISO, and I can pre-register different ISOs too. So if I want to make this one 3200, I can register that. There we go. So it didn't register, but you see the 640, the 400, the 200, and I can adjust that. Same with the shutter. And if I want to turn on false color, I can turn on false color to the LCD screen. I can change the peaking on or off. I can make this a vector scope instead of a waveform. If I have a LUT on a LUT that I wanted to put out to the LCD screen, I could put that LUT out to it, and I can exit out of there. And also on the top corner, on the top left corner, you notice it looks like a frame of film with a gear icon. I can touch that, and now I have access to 3 different pages of selections that I can change as far as my recording formats, my sensor mode. So if I want to change from Super 35 to Super 16 crop, if I want to go pre-record, if I want to go slow and fast frame rate recording. One thing about this is you can actually record an audio file with slow and fast recording now. If I want to change my main format, if I want to change my looks, there's a lot of different things that you can change just with a quick selection and a touch on the screen. So now we have a camera that's small, it's lightweight, it's easy to use, it's quick access to a lot of functions that, especially for event shooters and documentary shooters, reality TV production companies are really starting to look at this too, because now you have a camera that will give you adjustments on the fly a lot faster than a lot of other cameras out there could make happen for you. Also, this camera weighs, literally with a BPA 30, just over 3 pounds. And you also have the option of getting a compact cine servo, which with the grip on it weighs just over 3 pounds. So now you start to put these two pieces together. If you put a compact cine servo lens on the C70, you literally have an over-the-shoulder camera, same look, same zoom capabilities, same everything that you would get in a small, compact carry-on size. So for those of you who do documentaries, or if you do reality TV, this is something that you can get the same look and feel of a larger camera with a different, little more broadcast style lens in a carry-on bag that you can put on an airplane. You don't have to check anymore. The battery life is pretty incredible on it. So this is starting to check a lot of boxes for a lot of people, especially those who whose livelihood depends on getting a story, getting it fast, getting it out there. As far as that goes, I'm gonna go back into the recording formats. Before we do, are there any questions on anything that I covered so far?
Yeah, it looks like we got a couple folks want to talk about workflow. Looks like you're gonna go into that. Another question is, can you mount the servo lens and demonstrate the ergonomics of that Cine servo?
I would love to, actually. You know what? I'm going to do that before we go into the rest. So I'm just going to disconnect this real quick. It'll take me about 2 seconds, but I did make a video that's going to show up on. Excuse me. I did make a video that's going to show up on at least our social sites fairly soon on the compact Cine servo and the the C70. So here we go. I feel like I'm playing patty cake with all this stuff right now. So I'm going to give a little bit wider view. This is a simple adapter. This is the simple EF to RF adapter I have right here. And I'll take this, I just mount it right onto the front of the camera. I've got the 70 to 200 here. And the one thing I really do love about this lens is you do have a lens that has basically all of the EF autofocus capabilities with it. You do have a lens that has all of the cinema coatings and the glass. You do have a servo built into this lens too. So you kind of have the best of 3 of Canon's worlds in here. So you combine, at least on this lens, you combine the, here we go. Yeah, you combine the cinema glass with the cinema coatings. You combine the broadcast world with a servo motor and the variable zoom in there. You also have that remote capability with this camera too. And you also have the autofocus on the EF lenses. So now you've got this all together, which is, you know, like I said, just a little bit over 6 pounds. And this is a very well balanced unit right here. So if you do take this grip and you put it right on the top, you're able to basically balance this on one finger right in the middle, right where that mount is. And this camera will basically hold itself pretty much outright. The lens doesn't telescope, it doesn't zoom out. And actually, it's a nice, easy, comfortable feel. And it's something that you can get used to really, really fast. So did that answer anything for y'all over there? I hope it did. Cool. And then we were going to start talking about the workflow, right?
Yes. There's a couple Final Cut Pro users in here as well.
Okay.
I do want to say too, if workflow questions need to go a little bit more in depth too, something that both Peter and Grant are really great about, they've been making this type of conversation remotely available to us with our clients. So if you get a really specific question for an upcoming shoot about how one of these cinema products fit into your usage case, you're more than happy to do it over something like Zoom with these guys as well through Samys. So feel free to reach out to us.
Yeah, and that's, you know, it's just an extension off of Samys too. I mean, we love supporting these guys, these people over there. Ben, you're just, I can't say enough about you. You're great. I'll be a man. But yeah, we've got a great relationship with y'all, and we're more than happy to answer questions anytime. So that being said, I'm going to, yes, there are 2 audio inputs, and yeah, too many XLRs. There are separate gain controls on there as well. So basically every cinema camera we have separate gain control if you want, if you have an XLR going into input 1, you can double it up into input 2. There's a world where you can actually adjust them independently. So you can leave one at auto, you can leave one, 2 clicks down from, whatever the level is on the other one. So you have a safety in there built in on channel 2 if you need it to. So let's go into the menu just a little bit. Before we do that, recording formats, just wanted to throw this out there. You do have a lot of different options. You have XFAVC, you have 264 long GOP. You also have, excuse me, up to 120, up to 180 frames in there. And you also have some MP4 codecs too. So, excuse me, XFAVC and MP4s, you have 265s and 264s in there as well. And one thing I will say again, if you do want to record or capture your audio, you do have the option when you're capturing slow motion to record that audio to another card. The camera has 2 card slots. The video goes onto card A. The audio file is a WAV file that will be recorded onto card B. So you can take that audio and ramp it however you see fit inside of that slow motion video that you put in there. And so I'm gonna do, there we go. All right. So as far as the menu goes, the menu is going to be really simple as far as setting it up. The menu is set up just like a file cabinet. You can scroll through the menu pretty easily. There is a world where you can select, whatever your look file is, or excuse me, whatever your profile look is. Like for instance, I used look 10. I was actually able to create a cube LUT in Resolve, put it onto an SD card, put it into this camera, and I was able to give this camera a look. One thing to keep in mind with this camera, there is basically, let me get out of this. There's look files you can apply to different looks. So, if you saw on there, you have, Canon log, or excuse me, Canon log 2, Canon log 3, 709. You have PQ and HLG as well. So if you are stepping into that world, you can record that HDR video inside the camera as well. The camera is very capable of it. With the look file, you can create a look for an image. However, the LUTs, we'll say this, the LUTs are going to only go to the LCD screen right now. So if you're trying to output a LUT to say, like if I try to output a LUT, if I'm capturing in Canon log 2, I wouldn't be able to output the LUT through the HDMI cable so you can see it at home. Just to give you a heads up, this is something I don't want anybody to run into later on if you end up getting the camera and saying, hey, why isn't it doing this? I'm telling you right now, at this moment, you cannot output a LUT through the HDMI cable, but you can watch it through the LCD screen. So that being said,
just want to mention, Peter, there are incredibly low cost confidence monitors on the market today too that can
definitely
actually LUT a signal on the way out. So even as low as $300 now, we have products that could help you out with that issue if that's part of your workflow.
Yep. Yep. So now, you can go in, you can change the sensor mode, you can adjust all of these different, excuse me, all of these different parameters. What's kind of nice too is you do have 720 mode in here. This is something that a lot of cameras seem to be missing at this point. So you can actually go 720, you can do DCI or UHD. You do have the option to change, adjust your metadata. So if you want to change the reel number, the clip number, you can change all of that. The audio setups that we'd had before. There is digital stabilization built into this camera too. And that's one thing I wanted to talk about just really quick. When you do turn on the image stabilization, it will stabilize that image on the sensor. Basically, it crops in about 10%. If you go into Super 16 mode, you get a little bit better stabilization. If you do have an RF lens attached to this camera, it takes that stabilization to kind of a next level. So if you're capturing on a prime that, even anamorphic, there's a D-squeeze in here so you can observe what, the correct squeeze ratio would be for that anamorphic. You can stabilize that lens. If you're hand holding it, crop in on the sensor is a small price to pay for that stabilization on a lens that doesn't have stabilization. So that's something I wanted to throw out there as well before we got too far into things. And kind of jump back a little bit off of what we were talking about before. on the cards, one thing I will say is the V90 cards are the recommended cards. And what we have right now, these are the ones that we have tested, or at least Canon USA. These are available in the States. I know, Benjamin, you do have a lot of SD cards at the store. So I would rather, pass this off to you when it, comes to talking about the cards. But with this camera, V90 is basically the standard that you're going to need for that read and write speed, at least at the highest levels of recording.
Yep, and we do have a couple different V90 cards available, some that are on this list and others that we're going to be testing here at Samy's, just to make sure that everything's good to go.
Yep. And yes, you can dual record video. Yeah, so that's something that we've had it in a lot of other cameras. When you do record, let me see if I can throw this out there. There you go. Yeah, you do have the option to record actually different formats. So you can do XFABC or MP4, 4K or 2K. That's the advantage of having 2 card slots. So, you can kind of do like a proxy record, or you can basically set it up to do 2 different versions of it. And
Peter, is proxy only available to a second card, or are there any codecs where I can do the proxy onto the same media card as my primary footage?
If you're capturing at the same time, it would only be 2 separate cards. So it's not like you could record 2 files to the same card at the same time.
Copy that.
Yep. Unless, they pull some craziness out of them and there's something else that happens that we haven't seen yet. So let's see. I guess we'll talk about this. This is what we were able to get out of the 1DX Mark III. So you saw the faces show up. You saw the boxes around the faces when I turned it to the DCS chart. This is the same intelligent tracking that you would get out of the 1DX Mark III. So it's extremely intelligent. Like if a head turns to the side, or if your subject puts glasses on or a helmet on or something, the camera knows that the head is attached to the body. So it will keep that focus in there. It tracks a lot faster. You can adjust the speed of the tracking focus too. You can adjust, a little bit of a delay. It's built to be a little more human than robotic as far as the autofocus goes. And direct touch control, we talked a little bit about. One thing I wanted to talk about a little bit more is the auto ISO. And the only reason why is this brings up 2 things. One, again, I said it before, if you're in a situation where you really need to capture a moment and you want to let the camera at least take some of the burden of, focus and exposure and trying to get the frame right and everything, the camera can at least autofocus for you, and now it can auto ISO for you. The other thing is, if you have to put this camera in the hands of somebody that's not as camera savvy as you are, this camera will more or less help get a usable image out of somebody who may not have thought about every parameter in taking or capturing a shot. Yeah, hopefully I said that as nicely as I could. Auto iris with the RF lenses. So this takes it another step further. If you do have these RF lenses mounted onto the camera, you do get the option of having auto iris. Now it's going to be a one-touch iris. The other thing that I'll explain a little bit more is that image stabilization. You get that advanced stabilization when you have RF glass onto this camera. There's more lanes on the highway of information between the RF lens and the C70 than there are with an EF lens. And vertical video. I know to some people, they may not want to hear this. To other people, they may think this is the greatest thing ever. This is something that we just notice a lot of our users are really stepping into with the vertical advertising markets and with social media. This is something that's going to give you your images just the way your client intended them to be. Audio, we talked about audio. The one thing I will say is you do have a left and a right pickup on the front now. Traditionally, it's usually one pickup. It's not the best pickup in the world, but in a pinch, the audio sounds pretty good. You're going to be very impressed with the audio that comes off of this camera body itself. And one thing I'll throw out there too is this website, without my face on there, this website is basically the launch video that came off with the C70, if you haven't seen it. I think if you just type in C70 launch video, you'll find it pretty easily. But this is a nice little video that shows, you know, the camera in action, shows, you know, some of the shooting situations, and then there's another video right off of it that, you know, you get a little BTS of the people who've actually used it so far. That being said, Benjamin, have you all started receiving this camera yet?
Yeah, we have. So we got our first delivery end of last week. We got 3 more cameras today.
Cool.
We have a decent amount of people that have put in pre-orders with us at CinemaWorks, but we're happy to see the cameras start showing up here. I do want to let our customers know, definitely a good idea to put in a pre-order sooner than later if you're hoping to get this camera anytime early next year. The interest has just been really fantastic surrounding, I mean, all the tools they've packed into this small package. So I think Grant will probably have some info for us about what to expect as far as delivery timelines. But I would call and get yourself on our back order list sooner than later, or just go to samys.com where you can place an order there.
Yeah,
And
big back off that way. We do expect more sometime this month, but it's always best to, you know, check your Samy's camera sales rep for the latest info. So
yep.
And I'm gonna just throw out the promos that are currently going on right now with the C70. We do have Canon Financial Services that Samy's camera helps facilitate leases for, and the latest promo for the C70 is 0% for 2 years, or 1.99% for 3 years. So it's a great way to get the camera in your hands and really pay no interest for 2 years. So it's definitely a good thing to look into and check out.
Yeah, the guys at Canon Financial Services are incredibly painless to work with too. If you give us a call, you want to be on the pre-order list and check out their options that they make available to you, you'll probably have an answer inside of 48 hours, a couple business days, if that program is going to be a good fit for you.
Yeah. I think I've talked enough on here, unless anybody has any other questions.
Well, we've also had a pretty good amount of compact servo questions as well. That is also something that Canon Financial Services does have that 0% for. So it's not just the C70. Majority of our Canon Cinema EOS product, whether it be a camera or lens, does fall under that 0% for 2 years, or that 1.99 for 3. So that's just something to throw out there. Obviously we've gotten a pretty good amount of questions on that compact servo, so that falls under that as well.
Yeah, what an effective pairing. I mean, that is such a capable package, and the weight is just incredibly manageable with that lens, but really minimal breathing. That's a fantastic lens to pair with it. Almost feels like kind of an ENG setup. I talked about kind of the lightweight on this camera and how much they've crammed into a small package, but there are productions where you want sort of that larger cinema camera. One thing I like about the articulating screen on the C70 is you can actually flip out that sort of heads-up display for, an assistant camera operator or somebody on the AC side of the camera, and put a larger confidence monitor on top of it if we're in a full, studio type configuration. There's some neat things you can do to kind of build the camera out. You can make it a really big camera really quickly. We have all that stuff as well.
Yeah, definitely. And, like I said before, it's something that's getting a lot of interest as far as reality shows and event documentarians, event shooters. It's a really lightweight package, and the files that it delivers with the capability of, literally something you can throw overhead and on an airplane and go to your location and come back without having to check any camera gear is a pretty saucy endeavor for a lot of people.
And I think the price on this camera is incredible. It's $54.99 out the gate. And just the image quality on this new imaging sensor and the world of possibilities with EOS Cinema and the RF mount, I was really impressed when I heard they were coming out at $54.99. I easily thought you guys were going to hit this $2,000 above.
We did too, actually.
Really happy about that, especially with everything that's going on. I think a lot of people are behind on jobs this year, and the CFS option for the financing and a camera that's this powerful at this price point are going to be just perfect for a lot of filmmakers here.
Yeah, and we also consider turnaround time. Like I said, all these little auto features that are starting to find their way into this camera are really going to save you a lot of time when you need to get the shot. When you only have one take to get it, it helps a lot.
Yeah, We have to talk about that. Smaller teams out there right now, Canon's just giving you more options. I always like to be the punching bag and just say, Canon autofocus is fantastic. It's incredible. If you don't believe me, come into Samy's and I'll run back and forth around and you can see how these things lock in and track. It gives you an option for a shot you can't otherwise get in certain scenarios. And you guys just have the best autofocus in this form factor. A lot of new really powerful cinema cameras coming out that have 10-bit internal recording and things like that. Looks like they're giving you the world, but if you're not an experienced kind of follow focus operator and you need that type of tool for the things you're shooting, probably not the best bet for you. And this camera does a great job when paired with Canon autofocus lenses.
Yeah, the ITR on top of that as well. So Canon somehow made the dual pixel autofocus that much better. The ITR is something that we've had previously in the 1DX, but not in the cinema camera before. So it just kind of bumps that level of autofocus that much more. And Peter, I see one more question. Someone ordered one last week. And they're asking about how to get to the 10 stops of ND. So that's not necessarily an upgrade related to the question. That is something that you can go into the menu and just click on the extended ND range. So basically just layers 2 different ND filters to create 8 and 10 stops. So Peter can show you in the menu if you're still hooked up.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I was going to say too, just we'll cover 2 things with this next little setup, is basically even if you are an experienced follow focus operator, you do have the option to, you do get this focus guide built into the camera, even if you have, say, a CNE lens attached to it. So if you have any of the Canon primes, the Cine primes, you do get, the little box that will show up. If you have the face detection on, you get the box that bumps around on the face. And, it's just another tool to help you really, really get what you need. And when we go into this extended ND range, there you go. You can see it's right off of the first tab, and the menu is set up just like a file cabinet. You have tabs across the top. You open the file up, you have all the options inside the file. So you turn on the extended ND range. That's how you get the 8 and 10 stops of ND on there. And then also, if we really wanted to go and turn the focus guide on, you actually have a second focus guide if you really want. So now, if I pull this out and I go into here, I do have a CNE lens on this camera. So I do have basically an 85 Cine Prime, and I do have these focus guides on here, and you should be able to see these drift in and out, front focus and back focus, tack sharp, and I can also move these anywhere on the screen that I want to. So it's one advantage that you get if you even have, if you do like to pull your own focus, if you get a CNE Prime, a Cine Prime, EF mount, of course, Cinema Prime, you do get that information that transfers back and forth. So it's a full manual lens, but you do have that, that focus guide that will help get you tack sharp.
Cool. All right, guys. Just want to open it up to any more of our viewers. If there's any closing questions, feel free to put those in the chat. But the great thing about this session today, it's kind of an open book. Feel free to reach out to us at Samy's CinemaWorks and we can keep the conversation going. We're here Monday through Saturday right now, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. at the Hollywood store. All of our sales technicians have been fully trained thanks to these guys on all the ins and outs of the C70. So they'd love to talk to you about what you want to do with the camera and how it fits. And even if we want to jump on a Zoom meeting, if you don't want to be here in person in the showroom, I'm actually in a private office right now here on the 4th floor where we're set up to do this kind of thing with our customers. We can plug in the cameras and walk through everything. And these guys are just great. They keep making themselves available, especially during this time where people are trying to distance a little bit more. They've brought us a lot of education for our customers that otherwise would have been at home, especially with everything that's going on. So Peter and Grant, thank you so much for your time today. Doesn't look like we have any other questions in the chat, so I might shut it down.
Cool. Yeah, thanks again, everybody, for showing up. This is just means a lot that you're out there and we're able to talk, at least in this capacity. So again, any questions, feel free to throw them out there, and we'll be talking to you soon.
All right, guys, be safe.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.